Welcome to the Blues Trail Revisited podcast. It's episode 23, and I'm Ted Reed. This show is sponsored by the Clarksdale Tourism Commission, Visit Clarksdale, and produced in partnership with the Blues Foundation. The Blues Trail Revisited podcast is an offshoot of a film I finished this year about my return to the Mississippi Delta to rediscover the places I first encountered 50 years ago. To see the film, just go to www.bluestrailrevisited.com. If you're traveling through downtown Jackson, Mississippi, one great place to stop for a bite for lunch or dinner is Hal and Mal's, a restaurant and performance space that features some of the best local and national blues artists. But there's more here than just Southern cooking and music. Co-founder Malcolm White is also executive director of the Mississippi Arts Commission and one of the original forces behind the creation of the Mississippi Blues Trail. I wanted to talk to the man who helped get blues tourism off the ground, and I sat down with Mal at his restaurant to get his story.
My day job is I'm the executive director of the Mississippi Arts Commission, but I have many other hats that I wear, including being one of the owners of this place and a producer of a few events. I used to produce a lot of events, now I only produce a few. We're in historic Hal and Mal's. Actually, we're in the old GM&O Freight Depot, a building that was built in 1927 in downtown Jackson in a very different age for a very different purpose. But we have been here operating as a gathering place, a live music club, restaurant and bar since 1985.
Your day job is with the Arts Commission. What are your responsibilities?
The Arts Commission is a statewide arts agency responsible for funding and granting the arts in Mississippi. We fund nonprofit arts organizations, units of government, and individual artists. We are one of the 52 arms of the National Endowment for the Arts, our great American experiment to publicly fund the arts in this country, just like we fund the military and the veterans and the infrastructure programs. And we're the Mississippi arm of that great federal program, envisioned by John F. Kennedy, the Kennedy Center being the monument to that idea, put into place by Lyndon Baines Johnson, President Johnson, and has been in existence since 1965.
How did the Mississippi Blues Trail come to pass?
Well, there were a couple of false starts for the Mississippi Blues Commission, which oversees the work of the trail. Under the administration of Ray Mabus, governor, there was an attempt made to organize this thing called the blues and to see what state government could make of it. And I served on that commission back in the early 80s. But we could never really come up with a big idea about what to do. We knew that the Mississippi Delta was the birthplace of the blues and therefore the birthplace of much of America's music. And we knew it was important, and we had seen Memphis and New Orleans take advantage of heritage and cultural tourism, and we felt like we had a place there, but we really didn't have a big idea in the 1980s. The commission was later reconstituted under Governor Ronnie Musgrove. And once again, there was a lot of interest and enthusiasm, but no plan to take action until the very end of his administration, before Haley Barbour was elected governor. It was finally decided that what we should do was mark the blues and create a trail so that people could see and experience the places and the people and the story of the blues, and to finally put kind of a brand on it So we began this process of putting up markers and helping people find the blues and to find people in places and important locations across the state and across the world now, as well as the United States, to sort of follow the blues trail back to Mississippi, to the Mississippi Delta, where it all began. And so that work really got underway under Haley Barbour with the third iteration of the Blues Commission, and I was fortunate enough to serve on each of the three, but certainly more proud of the final work that we agreed on. And many other things have happened since then, but that's when the actual trail marking began.
Seems to be a really expensive undertaking. Those markers are not of the cheap variety. Each one is a production of its own, it looks like.
Yes, there are 200 in the ground in Mississippi. There's another 12 or 13 across the U.S. from California to Chicago and New Hampshire and other places. And there are 2 abroad, but there are 200 in the state right now. They cost about 10 grand, but all things considered, that's a very insignificant cost regarding the return on investment. I mean, Mississippi's never spent smarter money. We've never had a more successful cultural enterprise in our state than this trail. And of course there are sister trails. There's the Country Music Trail and the Civil Rights Freedom Trail, which are important as well in telling the story. And then we've just launched a Writers Trail, which will be another significant piece of our cultural tourism and civic pride building piece. But the Blues Trail was the first, and it was the most significant, and it taught us how to tell this story that we had long allowed other people to tell, and in our view had gotten it wrong, and we had not done the telling, and so we had not really participated in the story.
Was there any one individual who led the charge on this?
It was a group effort. There were many individuals. You've met some of them, I'm sure, while you're here. You met Edgar Smith. There have been others. Bill McPherson, I think I talked to you about Bill from Indianola. He really came on at a significant time and did a lot of good quality work. A guy named Fred Carl, who used to own Viking Range Corporation, served as chairman at a very critical time. But many people have come and gone from service to the commission, and all have contributed their share. But those would be the names of the ones that I feel like move the needle. And of course, Governor Haley Barbour really, I think, set us up for success by making some money available and putting an emphasis on it and telling us, those of us who were in the trenches, that it was important and that he supported it, and he would see that it got financing and that he would work to help it be successful. And sometimes that's all you really need, and he did that. And you know, others along the way have been supportive and have contributed. We've been able to raise money from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Endowment for the Arts. The Mississippi Transportation Department has contributed. Other significant corporations have given money. And as Dr. Smith told you, you know, we came upon the notion of the Benevolence Fund, which was a brilliant stroke on behalf of the commission to not just mark and to make a path for people to follow and to build civic pride, but also to take care of those who are less fortunate and who were in need of some, you know, maybe a little money for a hospital bill, a little money for electrical bill, a little money for a car, a little money for this and that. We even paid burial expenses from time to time, but this was one, I think, of the more important pieces of the puzzle that we came upon during the time.
Whatever the recent figures are, how much does the blues tourism bring in specifically to state profits this year?
Well, honestly, no one knows because it's extremely difficult to trace. Cultural tourists rarely sign in. They rarely make themselves known. They're very, anonymous about their comings and goings. But I would say cultural and heritage tourism in Mississippi is probably the third largest contributor to the tourism dollar. And of course we have gaming and we have beaches and we have outdoors and we have lots of other amenities and assets. But I think cultural heritage, which includes the blues, is probably the third largest fiscal contributor. But it's far and away the most important, and it more appropriately tells the story of what I think are the state's greatest assets. I don't think our greatest assets are manufacturing or industry or even agriculture, which is our largest component of our economy. I think our greatest assets are a story. The story about the blues, the story about literature and architecture and food and the Civil War and the great American Civil Rights struggle and all of the people who have made up this contribution, I think, that Mississippi makes to the American landscape, to the cultural landscape. And it's in all of these cultural assets where I think it's the most important thing that Mississippi brings to the table. And it's the one thing that I think we finally figured out. It is the smartest investment. There's no damage done to the environment. People come, they spend, and they tell their friends and neighbors what a great experience they had. They don't leave a large footprint. But they leave usually they leave with a great impression, and they go forth and they tell others. And it's the wisest investment that the state ever made. And it's the one thing that I think people are most proud of in the end.
Had the state made any efforts previously to recognize that heritage?
No. In fact, I think everyone, including the state, shied away from that story. African Americans shied away from it because it was the worst of their story, part of the worst of their story. Slavery was surely the worst chapter in their story. Jim Crow was awful. Sharecropping was not good. But the blues had also been lumped in with this hard time, hard scrabble, hard story that they were really quite ready to move beyond. Prosperity was not denoted by the blues. In fact, quite the opposite is true. So the African Americans were not particularly eager to embrace this story. White folks had no real claim to it. And government didn't know what it was, and certainly couldn't have figured it out in a million years, except that ultimately we did. And we all sort of came to this place at the same time, that it was advantageous for the state to get involved. It was culturally the right thing to do. It honored African American story. It lifted them up to a place of prominence and equal. And it could be used for other things like economic development, community development, tourism, building civic pride. And it was the biggest no-brainer in the bag. And we finally looked in the sack and saw it. Even a blind squirrel eventually finds a few nuts.
When I was down here 50 years ago, I was thinking it's a shame, this story is really only known by a few people. And you really have to go out of your way to hear it, to learn it, to find out anything about it. So when I heard there was a Mississippi Blues Trail, I was astounded because I felt that the momentum was such in the state of Mississippi that it was probably going to be the last thing they were going to recognize. And what was interesting to me was that it seems to have been across the board decision to do this. It wasn't just a bunch of white folks saying, oh, we should do this. It was the black community saying we should do this. It was people coming together, which I thought was pretty remarkable.
Well, it was remarkable, and it is remarkable that we have come to this place where everyone is of one mind, that everybody agrees that this is a good idea, and everyone has a stake in it, and everyone wins when it is successful. And there are very few initiatives that you could plug into that box. You know, with gaming, it's kind of one group of people. With agriculture, it's a smaller and smaller and smaller group of people every day. With mechanization, there are less and less human beings needed to produce the #1 economy in Mississippi. Farm takes less and less people. And in fact, the paradox really is that the farm laborers really brought the blues to us. And the #1 economy, agriculture, is slowly being sort of chased by culture heritage, by the blues, by the same people who were brought here to farm the land and to, you know, till the land and to produce the agriculture products, are now representing a creative product, you know, the art of the blues, the art of music. And we hope finally getting both credit and some money. You know, when this works, everybody gets paid, and it's not a big payday, but it is a payday. And another very interesting thing about the trail is the trail sort of metaphysically led us to build cultural institutions. So when the trail started bringing people to Indianola, it dawned on us that we needed a B.B. King museum there. When the trail began leading people to Cleveland, it dawned on us that maybe we could get a Grammy museum. And on and on and on it goes. We just opened an arts and entertainment center in Meridian where Jimmy Rogers was born and raised. And there is a cultural institution being built in Philadelphia by Marty Stewart, honoring country music. And what we've discovered is that the simple topographical and geographical experience of labeling this trail and creating this trail has actually led us to a bigger story to tell, to the creation of cultural institutions in small communities, which then demands infrastructure of hotels and restaurants and coffee shops and record shops and live music venues and things that visitors buy. So, you know, this long and winding trail, this long, strange trip it's been, has finally led us to this amazing sort of economic implosion and economic empowerment that is sort of the quintessential success of taking one story and creating all of these byproducts from it. And particularly when you think back that it was actually agriculture that brought us slavery, that transported the blues from West Africa to the Mississippi Delta, which we now hold up as this shining example of great American culture. And we say, you know, look what we have. And for us, it works.
What part did social media have in this?
Wouldn't have happened as quickly as it happened without social media. Without the ability to share the story, we would be years, we'd still be behind on this one. But because people can travel here and share that information with their friends and families and neighbors, then it really speeds up the information and really has begun to help us move to the next level.
If you were to look into the future, what do you think is next for Mississippi Blues Trail and, for the whole cultural explosion that's around this music that seems to be making, something of a resurgence?
Well, for us, we're in the business now. We figured out the business model. We know what it takes to run a trail. We know what the parts are. We know how to put them in place. We know how to promote them. We need to really, and when I was the tourism director for 3 years, I wanted to stop putting markers in the ground and start promoting and building itineraries on the existing trail. I thought we were at a point where we had done a really good job of explaining what this was and where it was, and we needed to take a little time and really market it, because we had hit that first wave of visitors. The people who are truly interested in the blues have been here, they're coming here, they get it, they know. The festivals are cropping up everywhere, the live music is making a comeback. But to get to that next tier of traveler, I felt like we really needed to do some serious marketing and promotion of explaining to other people, other travelers whose first priority might not be cultural heritage, but it might be food as a secondary thing, or natural resources. They might be interested in outdoors or hunting or fishing or maybe even gaming or whatever it might be. And so I felt like we really needed to pause, repair. These things get old and have to be maintained, particularly the linoleum side of the marker. It has to be repaired from time to time. That's what I was pushing for, was a time to really invest in marketing and branding and research, and promoting. So I think that's really next for us in order to expand beyond kind of the market that we've already reached. We've reached the first tier, I believe, and I think we need to really focus on the next tier.
Hal and Mal's is certainly, unofficial stop on the Mississippi Blues Trail, wouldn't you say? It'd be nice if someday the Arts Commission would put up a marker here.
Hal and Mal's is a stop on the Blues Trail and has been for a long time. Now we don't have a marker today, but someday we will, because we have long booked blues bands and blues music here. The first act we ever had was Albert King, and I mean, we have booked everybody who was working that we could get in the room in the blues genre, from the local cats on Monday night for the blues jam through, all the way up to big name entertainers. B.B. King played here a couple times. We've always featured traditional music here, whether it was blues or, country or traditional bluegrass or anything that had a real tradition behind it. Jazz music, we've always featured it. But we get a lot of people in here who are on the blues tour, who are on the Blues Trail, who are passing through Jackson. They'll go down to Ferris Street, they'll go to 119, they'll come over here. And having the music is a really important key. That's another part of succeeding. In order to really be successful, we've got to implement the Irish model. And the Irish model is, if you go to Ireland and you go in a pub and there's no local music, then you've had an unsuccessful visit to Ireland. Well, in Mississippi, if you come to Mississippi and you can't find a blues show on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night or a Sunday night, then your trip is unsuccessful. And so one of the things that we've got to do is make sure that there are blues bands and honky-tonks and juke joints when visitors come here to hear the blues. Now, if you're driving from Memphis to New Orleans and you're only going to be in Jackson on a Tuesday night and a Wednesday morning, and you're told, oh, blues only happens on Friday and Saturday, that's failure. And so that's another piece besides marketing that we really have to improve on. And when I was the tourism director, I advocated hiring blues musicians and putting them in small clubs across the state on off nights so that any and all visitors would be assured of a quality visit. If they went in to a small community looking for the blues, they would be able to hear live music. We're not there yet, but I still think it's a key to really being successful. And what we do here on Monday nights is exactly the model. They do it in Vicksburg on Tuesdays, and they do it in other communities on other nights. But it needs to be every night of the week within an hour, 2-hour driving radius of wherever a blues traveler is and when they come to Mississippi.
How can that be made to happen?
It would be simple. It would take one policymaker that's highly influential with appropriations to say there will be money made available to assure live music is played every night of the week in Mississippi in order to bolster and secure our brand of being the birthplace of America's music. And it's done every day, and it would not be any great amount of effort or really even that much money to assure that it happened. That's how Ireland did it. The government paid musicians to play. That's how we did it with the WPA. We hired artists and musicians to do projects that needed to be done, and we paid them with federal money. And that was the concept in the origin of the creation of the National Endowment for the Arts in 1965, when we said government will sponsor, government will fund creativity and the arts in America, and Mississippi needs an act that says Mississippi will fund working musicians every night of the week to ensure that this brand that we have created is legitimate and has longevity. It's the long tail of a big idea. Big ideas are no good if they're just birthed and set in motion and then people walk away from them. Big ideas succeed when there's commitment, when there is a plan for long-term success, and that's what needs to happen in Mississippi.
Well, you know, some folks are on my wondering, worry blues ain't bad. Well, some folks are on my worrying, you know the worry blues ain't bad. Well, it's the worst doggone feeling, you know, that I ever had. So sugar, give me beefsteak when I'm hungry. Feed me some whiskey when I'm tired. Whiskey when I'm hungry.
How can the state encourage young people to start playing the blues again, to start following it, so there's a new generation coming in?
By teaching it in the schools and returning music programs to the schools. Mississippi unceremoniously began to eliminate PE and art from our public schools about 20 years ago, and it was a disaster. And look at us now, and it was a terrible decision. We need to return playtime, PE, and music and art to the classroom. And we could do that strategically in Mississippi by saying that we are not just spending money on education, which for whatever reason doesn't seem to be legitimate enough, but we're spending money investing in the future brand of our state, which is, we claim to be the birthplace of America's music. We need to have America's music being taught in our schools. It needs to be in after-school programs. It needs to be in the classroom. We need to not only celebrate it and lift it up, but we need to be teaching it. And when people learn to play and then they enjoy it, then they will carry it with them the rest of their lives. Whether they become blues musicians, famous blues musicians or not, is not the point. The point is you empower children with the arts and they become more productive citizens, regardless if they're filmmakers or they work in government or they run restaurants and bars or they become shoe manufacturers. But that is how we could succeed, is by taking this thing that has been so giving for us, this thing called the blues, and not just treating it as economic development and community development and building civic pride and using it as a tourism tool, but using it as an education, empowering, lifelong learning implement to help Mississippians not only know the story about the blues, but to participate if they choose to. Symphonies ought to play the blues as well.
Yes.
And they do. We have many Pops orchestra concerts in Mississippi that will feature blues musicians because of the fact that we honor the blues.
Malcolm White, thank you very much for being on the Blues Trail Revisited podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's great.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening to the Blues Trail Revisited podcast in partnership with Visit Clarksdale and with the Blues Foundation. You can watch the film that inspired this podcast by going to www.bluestrailrevisited.com. And you can find out a lot more about Clarksdale, Mississippi by going to visitclarksdale.com or download the app and check out all the cool interactive features. And for news and info about the Blues Foundation and the Blues Hall of Fame, go to blues.org. I'd like to shout out a special hello to the folks at Live from Clarksdale and Shared Experiences USA. They're still live streaming music from Clarksdale and organizing special Delta experiences. Check out their Facebook page or livefromclarksdale.com and sharedexperiencesUSA.com. I'm Ted Reed, and to all you blues music fans out there, keep on hitting the blues trail. You never know what you're going to find. The Blues Trail Revisited podcast is produced by Ted Reed Productions. The field audio producer is Nolan Dean, and our project manager is Jamie Nice. Thanks for listening.
If I